When one of the most famous men on the planet sat down at his kitchen table on a Wednesday morning and read a text message from a number he didn't recognize, he read it twice. It was Wednesday, February 12, 2025, Orlando, Florida, 8:44 a.m. The kitchen was warm. The ceiling fan turned slowly. The February Florida light came through the window above the sink at the angle it comes through in February, flatter than spring, more specific. A gospel station played low from the small speaker on the counter. A coffee mug sat on the blue tablecloth. Outside, a mockingbird was on the back fence going through its catalog of borrowed songs. Shaquille O'Neal, 7 feet 1 inch tall, 325 pounds, sat sideways in a kitchen chair because kitchen chairs and his particular geometry have never reached a full agreement. His hands, wide enough to palm a basketball at 12 years old, wrapped around the coffee mug. He was not in a hurry. He was rarely in a hurry in his own kitchen on a Wednesday morning. His phone was on the table. A text arrived. Unknown number. 973 area code. Newark, New Jersey. He picked it up. The text said, "My name is Gloria Reeves. I don't know if you remember me. I used to watch you when you were small, on Clinton Avenue. I am fine. I am writing because someone told me I should. I am sorry to bother you." He read it once. He read it twice. He set the phone down on the blue tablecloth. He looked at the window. He looked at the mockingbird on the back fence. He did not move for 6 full seconds. Gloria Reeves, Clinton Avenue. He had not heard that name said out loud in years, decades. But something happened when he read it. Something old. The specific warmth of being small and safe in a place that smelled like lavender, and something cooking, and the sound of a television in the background playing the afternoon shows. The warmth of being cared for before you knew what being cared for meant. He picked up the phone. He typed, "Ms. Gloria, it's Shaquille. What do you mean you are fine? Tell me where you are." He waited. The mockingbird cycled through its songs. 3 minutes later the reply came. It said, "I am in my car. It is a blue Honda. I am in the parking lot of the Walmart on Route 9 in Lakewood, New Jersey. I have been here for 6 weeks. Please don't worry. I manage." He pressed both enormous hands flat on the blue tablecloth. He stared at the screen. Then he called Kevin Okafor. Stay with us through this entire video, because what Shaq discovers about the 6 weeks Gloria Reeves has been living in a blue Honda in a Walmart parking lot in Lakewood, New Jersey, and what he discovers about the 31 years that led to those 6 weeks, is something that will reach back to a 3-year-old boy on Clinton Avenue in Newark and change everything you think you know about who made it possible for him to become who he became. And when the full truth comes out, you will understand why a woman who watched a child every single day for 6 years and was offered payment every single week and refused it every single time is the exact kind of person who ends up in a blue Honda in a Walmart parking lot saying, "Please don't worry, I manage." But first, you have to understand Gloria Reeves, to understand what that text message meant and why it landed the way it landed on a Wednesday morning in February. You have to go back. You have to go back past the 4 NBA championships and the finals MVP trophies and the doctorate in education and the business empire, past the Los Angeles Lakers and the Miami Heat and the Orlando Magic and LSU, past all of it. You have to go back to Newark, New Jersey, 1975. Shaquille O'Neal is 3 years old. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 20 years old in 1975, and she was working. She worked the way young mothers work when they have made a decision about what their child's life is going to look like, and the decision requires money, and the money requires work, and the work requires going somewhere at 5:30 in the morning, with the sun not yet up, and the hallways of the building still quiet, and the child still sleeping in the apartment above. She had a neighbor who helped, for a while, and then the neighbor moved. And Lucille, 20 years old, working 2 jobs on a budget that required precision, needed someone who could be with the boy when she could not. The someone was Gloria Reeves. Gloria Reeves was 41 years old in 1975. She had lived on Clinton Avenue since 1963, 12 years, in the apartment on the 2nd floor, with the window that looked out onto the street. She was a large woman, with quick hands, and a steady way of moving through a space, the specific efficiency of someone who had spent her whole life organizing things, first as a seamstress in a garment factory in the ironbound district of Newark, then as a home health aide, then as what she was now, which was retired from formal work but not from the work of being present in the building where she lived. She knew everyone on Clinton Avenue. She knew their schedules and their names and their children's ages and their particular situations. She was the person you called when something needed figuring out, and the person who brought food when something went wrong. She had been doing this since 1963, and she had never been asked to do it. It was simply who she was. She noticed Lucille the way she noticed everyone who moved into the building. Young, precise, carrying a child who was already too large for his age, working before the building woke up, and working after the building went quiet. She knocked on Lucille's door on a Thursday evening in April of 1975. She said, "I know you go early. I know you're managing. I want to watch the boy in the mornings." Lucille said, "I can't afford." Gloria said, "I didn't say anything about money. I said I want to watch the boy." Lucille looked at her. Gloria said, "I'm up at 5 anyway. I like children. The building is quiet in the mornings, and I have nothing but time. Bring him down when you leave." And that was how it started. Every weekday morning from April 1975 until the summer of 1981, when Lucille's situation changed and the family moved and the chapter closed, the way chapters close, Gloria Reeves watched Shaquille O'Neal. She opened her door at 5:15 when Lucille knocked. She took the boy. She fed him breakfast. She kept him until Lucille came back. 6 hours, sometimes 8, sometimes more, when the shift ran long, or the bus was late, or the city did what the city did. She taught him things, not formally, the way you teach children things when you are simply present with them and treating them like people. She taught him the words for colors by naming everything in her apartment as they moved through it in the morning. She taught him to be gentle with things that were delicate. She taught him to say please and thank you, and to look at the person speaking to him. She told him stories from her own childhood in Alabama that she had not told anyone in 30 years. She called him baby, just that, not his name, not at first. Just baby, the way women of a certain generation called all the children who came through their hands, a word that meant, you are held, you are seen, you are here. She never took money. Lucille tried. Every week, reliably, she tried. She pressed bills into Gloria's hand at the door on Friday evenings. Gloria gave them back, every time, without drama, without making it into a long conversation. Just, no thank you. Just, bring him again Monday. Just, he ate well today. He's a good boy. She said this for 6 years. He's a good boy. The family moved in the summer of 1981. Lucille's situation had changed. Philip Harrison was in their lives. The army moved them. Germany, then Georgia, then San Antonio. The world expanded the way it expands when a military family moves, which is completely and without warning. Lucille and Gloria exchanged addresses. They wrote for a while. A few years. Life does what it does. The letters became less frequent. Then they stopped. Not from coldness. From the accumulated distance of lives moving in different directions at different speeds. Gloria Reeves stayed on Clinton Avenue for 11 more years. Then the building changed. Rents went up. She moved to Elizabeth. Then to Irvington. Then, in 2003, to a small apartment in Lakewood, New Jersey, where her cousin lived, and where the cost of living was lower, and where she had intended to spend the rest of her life comfortably on her Social Security and the small savings she had accumulated. She had spent the rest of her life there, comfortably, for a while, and then less comfortably, and then not at all. Her Social Security was $1,060 per month. In 2023, her landlord, a property management company that had bought the building in 2022, raised the rent from $840 to $1,100, a $260 increase. She requested a meeting. She wrote a letter. She was told that the new rate was consistent with market conditions in Ocean County. She fell behind in October 2023. She caught up in December, using her savings. She fell behind again in March 2024. She did not catch up. In August of 2024, she received a notice to vacate. She did not call her cousin, who was 73 and had her own situation. She did not call any of the people she had once known on Clinton Avenue, most of whom had scattered to addresses she no longer had. She did not call the county housing office because she had tried that in June and been told the wait list was 18 months. She packed her car, a 2009 blue Honda Civic, 140,000 miles on it, reliable still, the heat working and the locks working and the back seat folded down to make a space that was adequate. She had been in the Walmart parking lot on Route 9 in Lakewood for 6 weeks. When she sent the text to Shaquille O'Neal, she had not planned to send it. A woman from the county outreach van that came to the parking lot on Tuesdays had suggested it, had said, "You mentioned that name. You mentioned you watched him. Is there a way to reach him?" Gloria had said, "I don't have a number." The woman from the van had said, Let me see what I can find. It had taken her 3 days. Gloria had sat with the number for 2 more days before she typed the message. She had typed it on a Tuesday evening in the car, with the heat running and the February New Jersey cold outside the windows and the blue light of the Walmart sign on everything. She had almost deleted it 4 times. She had sent it on Wednesday morning. Then she had waited. She had not expected a reply. She had received one in under 4 minutes. She read it. Miss Gloria, it's Shaquille. What do you mean you are fine? Tell me where you are. She had sat in the blue Honda for a long moment before typing back. She had told herself, he is famous and he is busy and he doesn't have time for this and you are being a burden. She had typed the answer anyway, because the outreach woman had said, tell him where you are, that's all, just tell him where you are. She had told him where she was. Kevin Okafor received Shaq's call at 8:51 a.m. He had been with Shaq for 12 years. He had learned to read the calls by their quality. This one was the kind that did not require explanation before action. Shaq said, Gloria Reeves. She's in a Walmart parking lot on Route 9 in Lakewood, New Jersey. She's in a blue Honda. She's been there 6 weeks. I need everything. Who she is, what happened, what she needs, and I need someone to go there today. Kevin said, today. Shaq said, this morning. Kevin said, I'll handle it. Shaq said, Kevin. Kevin said, yeah. Shaq said, make sure the first person who goes is someone she can trust. Someone who doesn't make her feel like a problem being solved. Kevin was quiet for a moment. He said, I know someone. The person Kevin called was a woman named Patricia Osei Agyemang, 47 years old, a community housing coordinator who had been working with the foundation's New Jersey operations for 3 years. She was warm and methodical and had spent 20 years working with elderly residents in housing transition situations. She understood the difference between helping someone and making them feel helped, which is a significant difference, and not everyone understands it. She called Gloria Reeves at 9:22 a.m. She introduced herself. She said she was calling from a foundation that worked on housing issues in the area. She said she had heard that Gloria might need some support. She asked if she could come by. Gloria said, I don't want to be any trouble. Patricia said, you're not any trouble. Can I bring you a coffee? A pause. Gloria said, I drink mine with 2 sugars. Patricia said, I'll be there in 40 minutes. Patricia arrived at the Walmart parking lot on Route 9 at 10:14 a.m. The blue Honda Civic was parked at the far end of the lot, away from the main entrance, partially behind a row of shopping cart returns. The car was clean on the outside. Through the window you could see that the back seat had been folded down, and that there was a folded blanket and a pillow, and a plastic bin with organized contents, and a small bag with handles hanging from the headrest hook in the rear. She had made the space work. Of course she had. Patricia knocked on the driver's side window. Gloria Reeves opened the door. She was 71 years old. She was wearing a navy blue coat that was warm and practical and had been hers for many years. Her hair was white and close-cropped. Her eyes were dark and sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses that sat straight on her face. She was large-framed in the way of women who were large in their working years and have since reduced but maintained the bearing. She held herself upright in the car door the way people hold themselves when they have decided they are not going to let a situation define them. She said, you must be Patricia. Patricia said, I am, and you must be Gloria. She held out the coffee. 2 sugars. Gloria took the coffee. She said, you look cold. Come sit in the car. Patricia sat in the passenger seat. The car was warm. The heat had been running. It smelled like lavender, something Gloria kept in a small sachet on the dashboard. Patricia noticed the organization of the back area, the specific tidiness of someone who understood that dignity in a difficult situation requires maintaining order. She noted the Bible on the dashboard. She noted the photograph tucked into the sun visor. A young woman, maybe 35, laughing at something, in clothes from the early 1980s. Patricia did not ask about the photograph immediately. She asked about the coffee. She asked how long Gloria had been in Lakewood. She asked about the building, about the rent increase, about the notice. She asked the questions that helped her understand the full shape of the situation without making Gloria feel like she was being assessed. Gloria answered all of them, directly, without self-pity, with the specific matter-of-fact composure of someone who has been managing difficult situations her entire life and sees no reason to perform distress. After about 20 minutes, Patricia said, "Can I ask about the photograph?" Gloria looked at the sun visor. She said, "That's Lucille." Patricia was quiet. Gloria said, Lucille O'Neal. She was my neighbor on Clinton Avenue in Newark for 6 years. I watched her son. Patricia said, Shaquille. Gloria said, he was small then. Well, small-ish. He was never exactly small. She smiled at the window. It was the real smile. But he was young. He was 3 years old when I started watching him, and 9 when they moved. Patricia looked at the photograph. She said, how long have you had that picture? Gloria said, since 1980. Lucille gave it to me. Her cousin took it at a family gathering. She said she wanted me to have it so I'd have something to look at of her since she worked so early and I saw her mostly in the dark. Patricia was quiet. Gloria said, I've moved it from apartment to apartment for 45 years. It's always been on the wall, or on the visor, or somewhere I could see it. Patricia looked at the photograph of a young woman laughing in 1980. She thought about 45 years. She thought about a woman who watched a child every day for 6 years, and refused payment every week for 6 years, and kept a photograph for 45 years, and ended up in a blue Honda in a parking lot in February, and had almost not sent the text. She said, Gloria, I need to make a call. Gloria said, all right. Patricia stepped out of the car. She called Kevin. She gave him the full picture. She gave him the rental history, the notice timeline, the savings situation, the monthly income. She gave him the photograph detail, and the 45 years, and the lavender sachet on the dashboard, and the organized bin in the back seat, and the way Gloria held herself upright in the car door. Kevin listened without interrupting. He said, what does she need? Patricia said, immediately, a safe, warm place to sleep tonight that doesn't feel like charity. She's proud. She's organized. She's not broken. She just needs a door. Kevin said, I'll call you back in 15 minutes. He called back in 11. There was a fully furnished short-term apartment available through the Foundation's New Jersey housing network in Toms River, 12 minutes from the Walmart on Route 9. Clean, ground floor, 1 bedroom, a kitchen, a small living room with a window that faced a garden. Available immediately. 60 days guaranteed, longer if needed. Patricia went back to the car. She said, Gloria, I have a place. It's in Toms River, 12 minutes from here. It's available today. I'd like to take you there if you're willing to come look at it. Gloria was quiet for a moment. She looked at the coffee cup. She looked at the photograph on the sun visor. She said, who's paying for this? Patricia said, a foundation that works on housing issues in this area. They help people who need a bridge. Gloria said, whose foundation? Patricia paused. She said, his. The car was very quiet. The heat ran. The blue Walmart sign was visible through the windshield. Gloria Reeves, 71 years old, sat in her blue Honda Civic in the parking lot on Route 9 in Lakewood, New Jersey, and looked at the photograph of Lucille O'Neal on the sun visor. She pressed her lips together the way people press their lips when something is moving through them and they are managing it carefully. She said very quietly, he was such a good boy. Patricia did not say anything. Gloria looked at the photograph for another moment. Then she said, all right, let me get my things. The apartment in Toms River was on the ground floor of a small complex on Hooper Avenue, 2 blocks from a pharmacy and 4 blocks from a grocery store, and 12 minutes from the Walmart on Route 9. The garden outside the window had been put in by the previous tenant, a retired teacher, and had been maintained by the management company. It had a rosebush along the south side that would bloom in April. Gloria walked through the apartment with Patricia. She walked through it the way she walked through spaces, which is carefully and with attention. She looked at the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator. She checked the cabinet under the sink. She tested the tap. She looked at the window. She stood at the window and looked at the garden and the rosebush. She said, the roses will come in April. Patricia said, they will. Gloria stood at the window for a moment. She said, I'll take it. She moved in that afternoon. Patricia helped. There was not much to move. The organized bin from the back seat, 2 suitcases, the Bible, the photograph of Lucille. The photograph went on the kitchen windowsill, where the light would reach it in the morning, same as always. Shaq did not go to Toms River that day. He did not make it a moment. He let Patricia do her work, and Kevin do his work, and he stayed in Orlando, and he called his mother at 11:47 a.m. Lucille O'Neal answered on the second ring. He said, Mama, do you remember Gloria Reeves from Clinton Avenue? A pause, long. The specific kind of pause that contains something already known. Lucille said, Gloria. Of course I remember Gloria. What happened? He said, she's been living in her car for 6 weeks. The line was very quiet. Lucille said, no. He said, yes. She said, she never told anyone? He said, she sent me a text. She almost didn't send it. She said she didn't want to be a bother. Lucille was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and her voice had changed to the other register, the one he had only heard at very specific moments. That woman watched you every single day for 6 years. She never took $1 from me, not $1. I tried every week, he said. I know. Lucille said, she sent you a text saying she didn't want to be a bother. He said, yes, Mama. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, you fix it. He said, I'm fixing it. She said, and you thank her, not for me, for you. You go there and you thank her yourself. He said, I will. She said, Shaquille. He said, yes, Mama. She said, she called you baby. You remember that? He pressed his hand flat over his mouth. He held it there for 5 seconds. He said, from behind his hand, I remember. She said, you go see her. He said, I will. He drove to Tom's River on Saturday, February 15, 2025, 3 days after the text. He brought food from a diner on the way, the kind of diner that has been on the same road since 1974 and has not changed the menu significantly since then, which is the right kind of diner for a Saturday morning in New Jersey in February. He brought coffee. He parked in front of the apartment on Hooper Avenue. He knocked. Gloria Reeves opened the door. She looked at him. He looked at her. He was 7 feet 1 inch tall and she was 5 feet 5, and he filled the doorway completely, and she stood in it with her navy blue coat over her house dress, and her wire-rimmed glasses straight on her face, and her white close-cropped hair, and she looked at him the way you look at someone you last saw when they were 9 years old and are now encountering at full and impossible scale. She said, you got big. He made the sound that is almost a laugh, and is something else too. He said, Miss Gloria. She said, come in. I made coffee. Yours is probably cold. He came in. The apartment was already hers. 3 days, and it was already hers. The Bible on the end table. The photograph of Lucille on the kitchen windowsill where the light reached it. A plant on the counter that she had acquired somewhere. A small potted basil. The kind of plant a woman who keeps things organized always finds a way to have, because a home without something growing in it is not fully a home. He sat at the kitchen table. She sat across from him. She poured his coffee even though he had brought coffee from the diner, because she was Gloria Reeves and she was going to pour the coffee. She looked at him across the small kitchen table with her steady dark eyes. She said, you look like your mother. He looked at the photograph of Lucille on the windowsill. He said, she says the same about me. She said, how is she? He said, she's well. She sends her love. She said to tell you that she never forgot. Gloria looked at the photograph. She said, neither did I. They sat at the kitchen table, and he asked her to tell him about the 6 weeks. Not to process it, not as an assessment. Because she needed to tell someone who would actually listen, and he was there, and he was the right person to listen. She told him about October 2023 when the rent went up, about the letters she wrote and the calls she made, about the savings that covered December and did not cover March, about the notice in August, about the packing. She told it the way she told most things, which was plainly and without drama and with the occasional detail that made it specific, which is the difference between a story and an account. She said the hardest part was the Walmart parking lot. Not the cold, though the cold was real. Not the inconvenience, the parking lot itself, the cars coming and going all night, the lights never going fully off. She had slept lightly for 6 weeks because the lights never went off. She said, I kept the lavender sachet on the dashboard because it smelled like my apartment. My apartment had always smelled like lavender. I wasn't going to let go of everything. Shaq looked at the basil on the counter. He said, you got a plant. She said, first thing, third day, a home needs something growing. He said, my mother would say that. She said, your mother taught me that. She always had something on the windowsill in her apartment, even when there wasn't space for it. They were quiet for a moment. He said, Miss Gloria, I want to talk about what comes next. She said, I figured. He said, the apartment is yours for as long as you need it, no time limit. The foundation will work on a permanent housing solution, something in this area, something you own the security of. Patricia will help with the paperwork. She said, I don't want charity. He said, I know you don't. You never did. You gave my mother 6 years, and you didn't take $1 for it. This is not charity. This is a woman who did something that mattered, being allowed to have a door to close at night. That's what this is. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the photograph of Lucille on the windowsill. She said, "She gave me that photograph in 1980. She said she wanted me to have something of her to look at. I've looked at it every day for 45 years. He said, "I know." She said, "She was 25 years old in that picture. She looked so young." He said, "She still does." Gloria smiled. He said, "Can I call her, right now, so you can talk to her?" She was quiet for a moment. She said, "Yes, I'd like that." He called Lucille. She answered on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. He said, "Someone wants to say hello." He handed the phone to Gloria. Gloria took it with both hands. She said, "Lucille." And from the phone came Lucille O'Neal's voice, which after 44 years of silence was exactly the same voice, the specific, warm, precise voice of a woman who had always known exactly who she was and what she stood for, and what she said was, "Gloria, I have been thinking about you every day." Gloria pressed the phone against her ear with both hands. She closed her eyes. She said, "So have I." They talked for 22 minutes. Shaq sat at the kitchen table and drank his cold coffee from the diner and did not interrupt and let the 44 years close the distance they had opened. When they finished, Gloria handed the phone back. Lucille said to Shaq, "She's all right?" He said, "She's all right. She has a plant on the counter." Lucille said, "Good. A home needs something growing." He said, "That's what she said." Lucille said, "Of course that's what she said. We know the same things." She said goodbye. He put the phone down. He and Gloria sat at the kitchen table in the quiet apartment on Hooper Avenue in Toms River, New Jersey, in the February morning, with the basil on the counter and the photograph of Lucille on the windowsill and the rosebush outside that would bloom in April. Gloria refilled his coffee. He didn't need it. She did it anyway. He said, "Miss Gloria, I need to tell you something." She looked at him. He said, "I don't remember everything from when I was small. I was 3 when you started watching me. There are things I remember and things I don't. But I remember your apartment. I remember how it smelled. I remember feeling safe there. I didn't know what safe felt like as a concept when I was 4 years old. I just knew that I felt it there, in your apartment, every morning." She was very still. He said, "My mother worked hard for me. She gave everything. But there were hours every day when she wasn't there. And in those hours you were. And the kind of person I became, the way I treat people, the way I think about what being big actually means, some of that came from those hours. From being in a space where someone looked at me and said, 'You are held, you are seen, you are here.'" He stopped. The kitchen was very quiet. Gloria Reeves, 71 years old, looked at the man across the kitchen table from her, who was 9 years old the last time she had seen him, and was now 7 feet 1 inch tall, and one of the most famous people alive, and she pressed both hands together in her lap, and she looked at him with her steady dark eyes, and she did not cry. She was not that kind of woman, but something happened in her face. The specific expression of a person who has been given back something they did not know they had given away. She said, "You were always easy to love." He said, "You made it easy to be." The rosebush outside the window would bloom in April. The basil on the counter needed water in 3 days. The photograph of Lucille on the windowsill was catching the February light. Everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. What happened in the weeks that followed was quiet and complete. Patricia Osei-Agumang worked with Gloria on the permanent housing solution. The Foundation's New Jersey team identified an income-qualified senior housing program in Ocean County that had an opening coming in April. Gloria was connected to the program. The application was submitted. The approval came in March. In April of 2025, Gloria Reeves moved from the apartment on Hooper Avenue into a permanent 1-bedroom unit in a senior housing community in Brick Township, 8 miles from Toms River. Her rent was income indexed. Her Social Security covered it with a margin. There was a garden the residents maintained together. There was a rosebush in the common area. She planted basil on the kitchen windowsill. The photograph of Lucille went on the same windowsill, same as always. The outreach worker from the county van, the woman who had suggested that Gloria send the text, was named Danielle Marsh, 32 years old, working with Ocean County's homeless outreach program. She had been doing this work for 4 years. She drove the van on Tuesday afternoons to the parking lots where people were living, and she brought supplies, and she asked questions, and she listened, and occasionally she said, "Is there anyone I can help you contact?" She had said it to Gloria on a cold Tuesday in February. Gloria had said, "There might be someone. I don't know if he'd remember me." Danielle had said, "Let me find a number." She had spent 3 days finding it. When she heard what had happened, when Patricia Osei Agumang called her in March to tell her that Gloria was in permanent housing, she sat in the van in the parking lot and was quiet for a moment. She called her supervisor. She said, "I need to tell you something." Her supervisor said, "Tell me." She told the story, the text, the response in under 4 minutes, the apartment in 3 days, the permanent housing in April. Her supervisor was quiet for a moment. She said, "That's why we do the van." Danielle said, "Yeah." Her supervisor said, "One question, one door, one number found." Danielle said, "Yeah." Lucille O'Neal flew to New Jersey in May of 2025. She had not been to New Jersey in many years. Shaq arranged the travel. He did not come himself. He had considered it. He decided that this particular reunion did not need him in it. It belonged to the two women. Lucille arrived at Gloria's apartment in Brick Township on a Saturday morning in May. She brought food, because Lucille O'Neal always brought food. She brought a coffee cake she had made at 4 in the morning in Orlando, because she was 70 years old and still baked when she was going somewhere important. Gloria opened the door. The two women stood in the doorway for a moment. Then Lucille said, "You look exactly the same." Gloria said, "You don't." Lucille said, "I'm 70 years old." Gloria said, "You look beautiful." Lucille said, "You're still the one with the good manners." They hugged in the doorway of the apartment in Brick Township. Lucille, 70 years old. Gloria, 71. The last time they had stood in the same doorway was 1981, 44 years. Gloria said, "Come in. I made coffee." Lucille came in. She saw the photograph on the kitchen windowsill. The same photograph she had given Gloria in 1980. The same young woman laughing at a family gathering. She stood at the window and looked at it for a long moment. She said, "You kept it." Gloria said, 45 years, on every windowsill. Lucille pressed her hand flat against her chest. She stood at the window for another moment. Then she said, "Coffee smells good." Gloria said, "Sit down, I'll pour." They sat at the kitchen table and ate the coffee cake Lucille had baked at 4 in the morning, and drank the coffee Gloria had made, and talked for 4 hours without stopping, about Clinton Avenue, about the children who had grown up there, and where they had gone, about the building that was gone now, demolished in 2019, a parking lot in its place, about the dryers on the second floor that always ran too hot on the left, about a chess program a retired postal worker had run in the community room, about the summer of 1979 when the building's boiler had been out for 2 weeks and everyone had managed, and somehow the managing had made them closer, about a boy who had been 3 years old and already impossible to contain in a normal chair. Gloria said, "He used to fall asleep on my couch every afternoon. He took up the whole couch. He was 9 years old, and he took up the whole couch." Lucille said, "He still does." Gloria laughed. Lucille laughed. The kitchen was warm. The May, New Jersey morning was coming through the window. The basil on the windowsill was growing well. In June of 2025, a month after Lucille's visit, Gloria Reeves wrote a letter. She wrote it by hand, because she wrote letters by hand. She wrote it to the County Outreach Program, to Danielle Marsh specifically, care of the Ocean County Office of Homeless Services. She thanked Danielle for the Tuesday she had asked the question. She said, "You asked if there was anyone I could contact. I almost said no. I'm glad I said maybe." She signed it Gloria Reeves. She added a postscript. The postscript said, "Tell your supervisors the van matters. Every Tuesday. Even when nothing seems to happen. Something is always happening." Danielle received the letter on a Tuesday afternoon, between her second and third parking lot stops. She read it in the van, parked outside a Wawa, on Route 9 in Lakewood. She folded it carefully. She put it in her bag. She drove to the next stop. She asked the questions. She listened. Because somewhere out there right now, there is a woman in a parking lot. She has been there for more than a few days. She has made the space work, because she has always made difficult spaces work. She has something on the dashboard that smells like the home she had. She is not broken. She is just without a door. And somewhere near her, someone is asking, "Is there anyone I can help you contact?" And she is deciding whether to say yes. This story is for the moment she says maybe. This story is for the woman who finds the number. This story is for the text that says, "Please don't worry, I managed that almost got deleted." And for the reply that came in 4 minutes. Because a woman who watches a child every day for 6 years and refuses payment every week for 6 years and keeps a photograph for 45 years on every windowsill of every apartment she ever lived in is not someone who should be in a parking lot in February. She is someone who should have a door and a window and something growing on the windowsill and a rosebush in the common area that blooms every April, same as always. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. From Newark, from Lakewood, from Toms River, from Brick, from Orlando, from every city where someone once watched a child every day and never asked for anything back. We read every single comment, every one. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone who was there for you before you knew what being there meant, please hit that like button right now. 1 second. It helps this reach someone tonight who needs to hear that the people who gave the most sometimes need the least to keep going. Just a door, just a window, just a rosebush in April. Share this with one person today, the one who was your Gloria, the one who opened the door at 5:15 in the morning without being asked, the one who said, "Bring him again Monday," because that is exactly how this kind of love travels. One morning at a time, one door at a time, one maybe at a time. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is something you are absolutely not going to see coming. We will see you there. There is a detail about the text message that Gloria almost deleted. She wrote it on a Tuesday evening. She had been in the Walmart parking lot for 6 weeks and 1 day. The temperature outside was 23 degrees, and the car heat was running, and the blue Walmart sign was on everything. She had her phone in her lap, and Danielle Marsh had texted her the number 3 days before, and she had been looking at it for 3 days. She had composed the text 4 times. Each time she had typed it and read it back and deleted it. The first version was too long. The second version mentioned too many details about the car and the parking lot. Details that felt, when she read them, like complaint. The third version was too short and sounded strange. The fourth version was the one she sent. She had read the fourth version once. She had not read it again. She had pressed send before she could talk herself out of it. She had put the phone face down on the passenger seat after sending it. She had thought, "He is busy. He doesn't remember me. It has been 44 years. This was a mistake." She had thought about Danielle saying, "Tell him where you are. Just tell him where you are." She had thought about Lucille giving her the photograph in 1980 and saying, "So you have something to look at of me since you see me mostly in the dark." She had looked at the photograph on the sun visor. She had thought, "I will give it 3 days. If he doesn't respond in 3 days, that's the answer and I will figure something else out." She had been calculating what something else could look like when the phone buzzed. She picked it up. "Miss Gloria, it's Shaquille. What do you mean you are fine? Tell me where you are." She read it once. She looked at the photograph on the sun visor. She thought, "He remembered me." She thought, "Of course he remembered me. He was 3 years old in my apartment every morning for 6 years. You remember where you were safe. You always remember where you were safe, even when you are 53 years old and 7 feet 1 inch tall, and one of the most famous people alive. You remember." She typed her reply. Then she put the phone back down. Then she sat in the blue Honda in the parking lot on Route 9 in Lakewood, New Jersey, in the 23-degree February evening, with the Walmart sign on everything, and she cried for exactly 4 minutes. Not the crying of despair. Not the crying of relief, exactly. The crying of something that had been held for a long time, being released carefully. The crying of a woman who had been managing for 6 weeks and had not let herself feel the weight of the managing and was now, briefly, in the privacy of a blue Honda in a parking lot at 8:56 p.m., allowing herself to feel it. 4 minutes. Then she folded her hands in her lap. Then she said, out loud, to no one, "All right." And then she went to sleep. Because there was a reply. And the reply meant there was a next thing. And the next thing would sort itself out, because things sorted themselves out when someone was paying attention. And someone was paying attention. Same as always, Kevin Okafor, after 12 years with Shaq, had developed a specific instinct for the calls that required him to move without being fully briefed. The 8:51 call on February 12th was one of those calls. He had heard the quality in Shaq's voice, which was not urgency exactly but was its quieter cousin. The quality of someone who has identified something that needs to be corrected, and has already decided it will be corrected. He called Patricia Ose-Agyeman at 8:57. He explained the situation in under 3 minutes. He said, "Elderly woman, 71, former caregiver to Shaq when he was small, living in her car at a Walmart on Route 9 in Lakewood. 6 weeks. He said, she needs to feel like she's being helped by people who understand that she's a person, not a case. Patricia had said, I understand. She had understood. That was the right word. She had understood because she had spent 20 years in this work, and she knew the difference, which is the difference between being processed and being seen, and she knew which one actually helped. She had called Gloria at 9:22. She had brought coffee with 2 sugars. She had sat in the passenger seat and not started with the forms. That was the whole thing. Not starting with the forms. Starting with, how are you? Starting with, tell me about the building. Starting with, is that a photograph? The forms came later. The forms were necessary. But they came later. By that evening, Gloria Reeves had a key to an apartment on Hooper Avenue in Toms River, New Jersey. She had not spent another night in the parking lot. Kevin sent Shaq one text at 7:43 p.m. that evening. It said, she's in, ground floor, garden view. She has a plant. Shaq replied 2 minutes later with a single word, good. He was in his kitchen when the reply came back. He was at the same table where he had read the morning text, the ceiling fan still turning, the gospel station still low. The February Florida light long since gone, replaced by the February Florida evening, which was mild and specific, and made no claims. He read Kevin's text. He read his own reply. He put the phone down on the blue tablecloth. He sat for a moment. He thought about a morning in 1977. He was 5 years old. He could not remember the specific morning, but he remembered the quality of the mornings, which was warm, which was lavender, which was the sound of television in the other room, which was safe. He thought about what safe feels like when you are 5 years old. It is not an abstract concept. It is not a word. It is a feeling in the body, the specific absence of the weight of not safe, and you feel it in your chest and your shoulders and the way you breathe. He had felt it in Gloria Reeves's apartment every morning for 6 years. He had not thought about it in those terms until this evening, until a text from a woman in a parking lot in New Jersey had made him think about it. He thought, she gave that to me, every morning for 6 years. She gave me that feeling, without being asked, without taking anything in return, and then she moved on with her life, and I moved on with mine, and 44 years passed, and she ended up in a parking lot, and almost didn't send a text. He pressed both hands flat on the kitchen table. He thought, that is over, that is corrected. She has a door and a window and a plant. He picked up his phone. He called his mother again. She answered on the first ring. He said, she's in an apartment, tonight. Lucille said, thank God. He said, she has a plant on the counter. Lucille said, of course she does. He said, Mama. Lucille said, yes. He said, did she ever tell you why she wouldn't take the money? Long pause. Lucille said, once. She said, I watch him because he needs to be watched, and you need to go to work, and those are 2 things I can do something about. She said, that's not something you pay for. You pay for services. This is just what people do for each other. He was quiet. Lucille said, she meant it. He said, I know. Lucille said, she always meant what she said. He said, I know that too. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you did right. He said, you taught me how. She said, go to bed. It's late. He said, yes, Mama. She said, good night, baby. He set the phone down. He sat at the kitchen table for a while. The ceiling fan turned. The gospel station played low. Outside, the February Florida night was mild and very quiet. He finished his coffee. He went to bed. Danielle Marsh, 32 years old, drove the Tuesday van for 2 more years after the morning she had suggested that Gloria contact someone. She drove it in the cold months and the warm months and the months in between. She asked the questions. She listened. She found numbers when numbers needed to be found. She told the story of Gloria Reeves, without identifying details, in a training for new outreach workers in October of 2025. She told it as an example of what the single question could do. She said, is there anyone I can help you contact? I asked it on a cold Tuesday in February. The woman said maybe. 3 months later she was in permanent housing. She said, I am telling you this not so you think every question ends this way. Most questions do not end this way. Most questions end in a slow process and a waiting list and incremental progress. But some questions change a morning, and you do not know in advance which questions those are. So you ask every one. The new outreach workers wrote this down. One of them asked, "What if she had said no?" Danielle said, "Then I would have come back the following Tuesday." Patricia Osei-Agimang, the housing coordinator, stayed in touch with Gloria through the spring and into the summer, monthly check-ins, then quarterly, then just the occasional call. Gloria did not need much. She had always been organized. She had always been a person who figured things out. She figured out the new neighborhood. She found the pharmacy and the grocery store and the garden center where she bought the basil and later a small tomato plant that she grew on the balcony of her unit through the summer. She found the senior center on Hooper Avenue, 3 blocks away, where she went on Thursday mornings for the coffee hour and eventually for the card group that met on Monday afternoons. She found the church on Cedar Bridge Avenue that had the choir she liked, and the minister who didn't speak too long, and the coffee after the service that was better than most. She built a life, because that is what she did. She always built a life. It was what she had been doing since 1963, when she moved to Clinton Avenue in Newark and learned the schedules and the names and whose dryers ran hot and whose children needed watching. She built lives wherever she was. This was just the next one. On a Thursday morning in September of 2025, 7 months after the text from the Walmart parking lot, Gloria Reeves sat at the card table in the senior center on Hooper Avenue and played pinochle with 3 women she had known for 6 months and felt like she had known longer. One of the women, a retired nurse named Dorothy, 74 years old, asked where she had lived before Brick. Gloria said, "I moved around a bit. I was in Lakewood for a while. Before that, Elizabeth. Before that, I was on Clinton Avenue in Newark for many years." Dorothy said, "Clinton Avenue. What part of Newark was that?" Gloria said, "Near the downtown, toward the north side." Dorothy said, "I had an aunt on Clinton Avenue, a long time ago." Gloria said, "What year?" Dorothy said, 1974, 1975. Gloria said, "I was there in 74. Dorothy looked at her. Dorothy said, "What building?" Gloria said the number. Dorothy's mouth opened. She said, "My aunt was on the 3rd floor." Gloria said, "I was on the 2nd. They looked at each other across the card table for a moment. Then Dorothy said, "Her name was Marvella." Gloria said, "Marvella Jackson. She had the geraniums in the window." Dorothy pressed her hand to her mouth. She said, "You knew her." Gloria said, "I knew everyone in that building." Dorothy Jackson, 74 years old, retired nurse, who had moved to Brick Township from Asbury Park in 2019 and had been coming to this Thursday card group since 2021, looked at the woman across the card table from her who had been on the 2nd floor of the same building as her Aunt Marvella in 1974 in Newark. She said, "I visited her once. I was maybe 12. She showed me the building. She showed me all the people she knew." Gloria said, "I probably met you then. I knew all the children who came through." Dorothy said, "She always said the 2nd floor lady was the one you could count on." Gloria was quiet for a moment. She said, "Your aunt was a good woman. She brought me soup once when I had a cold. I've always remembered that." Dorothy said, "She passed in 1998. Gloria said, "I'm sorry. She was a good woman." They played their cards. They talked about the building and the neighborhood, and what Newark had been in those years, and what it had become. They talked about Marvella's geraniums, and the way the building had smelled in winter when everyone was cooking, and the specific sound of the radiators at 3 in the morning. After the game, walking out into the September New Jersey morning, Dorothy said, "How long have you been in Brick?" Gloria said, "Since April." Dorothy said, "You like it?" Gloria said, "I do. The common area has a rose bush." Dorothy said, "I know that rose bush. I helped plant it in 2022. Gloria smiled. Dorothy said, "I'm here every Thursday." "You?" Gloria said, "Every Thursday." She walked home on Hooper Avenue in the September morning. The rosebush was blooming still, late September, the deep red of it against the green. She stopped and looked at it. She thought about Clinton Avenue and the building that was gone and the woman on the 2nd floor who knew everyone and the geraniums in Marvella's window and a boy who took up the whole couch when he fell asleep in the afternoons. She thought about a text sent from a parking lot that almost wasn't sent. She thought, "Here I am." Here she was, the rosebush blooming in September. The basil on the kitchen windowsill. The photograph of Lucille in the morning light, Thursday card group. Dorothy across the table who had a geranium aunt in 1974. The world is small when you have been in it long enough to build your corners of it carefully. She went inside. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. She looked at the photograph of Lucille on the windowsill. She said, out loud, to the photograph, "Did you know about Dorothy's aunt?" The photograph did not answer. Gloria said, "I think you would have liked her." She brought soup. She drank her coffee. The September morning continued. And somewhere in Orlando, a man sat at a different kitchen table with a different ceiling fan and a different mockingbird on a different back fence, and thought about a morning in 1977 when he was 5 years old in an apartment on Clinton Avenue that smelled like lavender and was safe. And the morning was safe, and he knew it. He always knew it. He just hadn't had the words for it until the words arrived on a Wednesday morning in February from a 973 area code. And the words were, "I am fine. I am in my car. I have been here for 6 weeks. Please don't worry. I manage." And the reply had come in 4 minutes. And the reply had said, "Tell me where you are, because some things you remember even when you are 53 years old, and the world has moved, and the building is gone, and 44 years have passed. You remember where you were safe, you always remember, and when the person who made you safe needs a door, you find the door. That is the whole story. That is all of it. That is exactly enough." Lucille O'Neal, in the weeks after her May visit to Brick Township, thought about Clinton Avenue more than she had in many years. She thought about it the way you think about a place when you have been back near it, and the thinking is no longer abstract. She thought about the stairwell with the specific smell of other people's cooking. She thought about the laundry room in the basement where the dryers on the left ran hot and the dryers on the right didn't run hot enough, and you had to account for this in your planning. She thought about the way the building sounded at night, which was the sounds of other lives continuing around you, comforting in a way that later, in the houses they lived in as the family's situation improved, she had sometimes missed. She thought about 20 years old, and working 2 jobs, and leaving in the dark. She thought about knocking on the second-floor door at 5:15, and the door opening with the warmth and the lavender, and the boy being taken from her arms into arms she trusted completely. She thought, "I was 20 years old. I had almost nothing, and I had that. I had that door, and I had that woman, and I had the specific peace of mind of knowing that when I left in the dark, the boy was held." She had not known how much that had cost her nothing, how significant the having of it was. When you are 20 years old and you are managing everything and something that should cost you something costs you nothing, you take the gift and you use it and you are grateful, but you do not always fully account for the weight of what you were given. She accounted for it now. She called Shaq on a Tuesday evening in June, 5 weeks after the May visit. He answered on the second ring. She said, "I've been thinking." He said, "About what?" She said, "About what she gave me, not you, me." He waited. She said, "I was 20 years old. I had almost nothing. I had you, and I had my job, and I had the specific determination to make it work. And what she gave me was the ability to go to work every morning without worrying about what was happening to you. Do you understand what I mean?" He said, "Yes." She said, "That is not a small thing. When you are 20 years old and you are managing everything, the one thing you cannot manage is the worry about your child." And she took that from me, every morning. She took that specific worry and she replaced it with trust. And the trust let me do my job and do it well, and the job did what it did over the years. He was quiet. She said, "I would not be where I am if she had not been where she was. I would not have been able to do what I did. And you." She stopped. He said, "Say it." She said, "You would not have been who you became if you had not been in that apartment every morning. Safe, held, told you were a good boy. You were a good boy, Shaquille. You were always a good boy. And someone was there to tell you that when I couldn't be." He pressed his hand over his mouth. He held it there. She said, "I am saying this because I want you to understand the full weight of what happened in that parking lot. It was not just a woman in a difficult situation. It was the woman, the specific woman, without whom the chain of things that had to happen for you to become who you are might have broken at the very beginning." He was quiet for a long time. He said, "I know, Mama." She said, "Do you?" He said, "I do. I knew it when I read the text." She was quiet. He said, "That's why the reply came in 4 minutes." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." She said, "Good night, baby." He said, "Good night, Mama." The June Orlando evening continued outside the kitchen window. The mockingbird was still on the back fence, still running its catalog. 11 songs. Shaq had counted them many times. He put the phone down. He sat at the kitchen table. He thought about 20 years old, and working 2 jobs, and leaving in the dark, and a door that opened at 5:15, and the warmth, and the lavender, and the trust that replaced the worry. He thought about what a chain of things looks like when one link holds. He thought about Gloria Reeves, 71 years old, in an apartment in Brick Township, with a basil plant on the windowsill, and a rosebush in the common area, and Dorothy from the Thursday card group, who had an aunt with geraniums on the 3rd floor in 1974. He thought, that is what safe looks like when it has had 44 years to grow. It looks like a Thursday card group, and a rosebush, and a woman who remembers your aunt's geraniums. That is the whole thing. That is what the 6 weeks in the parking lot was an interruption of. And now the interruption was over, and the life was continuing, same as it always had, same as it always would. In October of 2025, 8 months after the text from the parking lot, the Ocean County Office of Homeless Services published its annual report. The report included a section on successful housing placements in 2025. It listed 47 individuals who had moved from unsheltered situations into stable housing through the county's outreach programs and partner organizations. Gloria Reeves was not listed by name. The report used initials and general descriptions to protect privacy. But entry number 14 read, GR, female, 71, senior, placed in permanent senior housing through community partner, April 2025, previously living in vehicle for approximately 6 weeks. Danielle Marsh had written the entry. She had written 47 entries. Entry 14 had taken her a moment longer than the others. She had read it back twice. She had added a note at the bottom of the entry that was not required by the form. The note said, this placement was made possible by a contact the client reached out to on her own, with encouragement from outreach staff. The contact responded in under 4 minutes. The note was not required. She wrote it because she thought it should be in the record. Because records are how things get remembered. And this deserved to be remembered. On a warm Wednesday morning in November of 2025, 9 months after the text, Gloria Reeves sat in her kitchen in Brick Township with her coffee and the morning light, and the basil on the windowsill, and the photograph of Lucille where the light reached it, and she read something on her phone. Shaq had sent her an article. He did this occasionally, something he had read that he thought she would like. This one was about a community garden project in Newark, on the east side, near the river, where a group of retired women were growing vegetables in raised beds on land that used to be a parking lot. She read the article. She looked at the basil on her windowsill. She looked at the photograph of Lucille. She typed back, "Looks like something your mother would do." His reply came in 2 minutes. She would. She's already asking about it. Gloria smiled. She put the phone down. She drank her coffee. The November New Jersey morning was cold and specific. The rosebush in the common area was bare now, dormant for the winter, but it had bloomed through October, the deep red of it against the green. It would bloom again in April. She knew this because she had watched it bloom, and she had seen what came after, and she understood that what came after was not the end of the thing. It was just the next part of it, spring. And then what comes after spring, same as always, same as it had always been. She finished her coffee. She washed the cup. She went about her day, same as always. And in the parking lot on Route 9 in Lakewood, the Walmart sign was on. The lights in the lot were on. The carts were in their returns. The Tuesday van would come at 2 p.m. with Danielle at the wheel asking the questions and listening to the answers and finding numbers when numbers needed finding. And somewhere in the lot, or in a lot nearby, or in the next town over, there was a car with someone in it who was managing, who had made the space work, who had something on the dashboard that smelled like the home they had, who was not broken, who just needed a door, and the question was already on its way, from the Tuesday van, or from a neighbor, or from a woman who had once been on the second floor of a building on Clinton Avenue in Newark, who knew everyone, and whose apartment smelled like lavender, and who always had something growing on the windowsill. The question was already on its way. Is there anyone I can help you contact? And the answer, when it came, would come in 4 minutes, or 4 days, or 4 years. But it would come. It always comes. When someone asks the right question, and someone else finally says maybe, that is the whole thing. That is all of it. That is the story. From a building on Clinton Avenue, to a parking lot, to an apartment with a rosebush, to a Thursday card group, and a woman with an aunt who had geraniums and a basil plant on a windowsill, and a photograph in the morning light. Same as always, all the way through. That is everything. On the Saturday that Shaq drove to Tom's River, the Saturday of February 15, 2025, he stopped at the diner on the way he had said he would. The diner was on Route 9, about 14 miles north of Tom's River, a place called the Route 9 Diner that had been on Route 9 since 1974 and had not changed the menu significantly since the mid-1980s. He ordered scrambled eggs and toast and coffee for two and asked the woman behind the counter to put it in a bag. She recognized him. People always recognized him. She handled it the way New Jersey handled most things, which was to note it without making a production of it. She said, "You want the large coffee or the extra large?" He said, "Two of the large. One with 2 sugars." She said, coming right up. He waited at the end of the counter. The diner smelled like bacon and coffee, and the specific warm smell of a diner at 9 in the morning, which is one of the most trustworthy smells in the world. A man at the counter was reading a newspaper. 2 teenagers in a booth were eating pancakes with the focused silence of people who had been awake too long. A woman in a booth by the window was writing in a notebook. Shaq stood at the end of the counter and thought about the last time he had been in New Jersey, 2 years ago. A business meeting in Newark. He had not gone to Clinton Avenue. He had not gone to any of the places. He had done the meeting and gone to the airport and come home. He thought about why he hadn't gone to Clinton Avenue. He thought, there was nothing there to go to. The building was gone. A parking lot. He thought, that is not entirely the reason. He thought, the real reason is that you don't go to the places where you were cared for before you knew how to be grateful for it. Because going there asks you to reckon with the gap between what you were given and what you gave back, and that reckoning is uncomfortable. He thought, I should have gone to the diner. I should have found the diner and sat at the counter and thought about 1977. He took the bag. He drove to Tom's River. He drove the rest of the way thinking about the diner in 1977, which he had no specific memory of, but which he knew had been there, because diners are always there, because diners are one of the things that stays. When he arrived at the apartment on Hooper Avenue, and Gloria opened the door and said, "You brought food," he said, "from the diner." She said, "Which diner?" He said, "The Route 9 Diner, about 14 miles north." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That diner has been there since before you were born." He said, "I know." She said, "Come in." They ate the eggs from the diner at the kitchen table. The toast was still warm. The coffee with 2 sugars was exactly right. These are small details. They are the only kind that matter. Patricia Osei-Agumang, in the weeks following the placement, had one more conversation with Shaq about Gloria that she has thought about many times since. He had called her to thank her. She had said, "I just did the job." He had said, "You did the job in the way that the job needs to be done, which is different from just doing it." She had said, "How so?" He had said, "You brought coffee with 2 sugars. You didn't start with the forms." She had said, "That's standard good practice." He had said, "No, it's not. It should be. But it's not." She had thought about that. She had written it in her notes for the next training she ran for new housing coordinators. She had written, "Don't start with the forms. Start with, 'How are you?' Start with 2 sugars or 1. She had written, "The job is to see the person before you see the case. The forms will tell you the case. The person has to tell you themselves." She had run that training in June of 2025, 4 months after Gloria's placement. There were 11 new coordinators in the room. She told them about starting with coffee. She told them about not starting with the forms. She told them about the specific quality of dignity in difficult situations, which is not about pride or stubbornness or refusing to ask for help. It is about being a person and being seen as a person before you are seen as a problem to be solved. She said, "When you arrive at someone's car in a parking lot, you are walking into their home, their temporary, difficult, inadequate home, but their home. Behave accordingly." The room was quiet for a moment. One of the new coordinators raised her hand. She said, "What if they say they're fine?" Patricia said, "They probably are fine. Fine is a large category. It contains many things. Your job is to find out which kind of fine they are, and you do that by being the kind of person they can tell." The coordinator wrote that down. Patricia continued the training. Shaq visited Gloria in Brick Township a second time. in July of 2025. He brought food from a different diner, one closer to Brick, one that a man at the Route 9 diner had told him about when he went back in July to ask. The man at the counter had said, "You want good eggs in Brick, go to the Cedar Bridge diner." He had gone. He brought eggs and toast and coffee with 2 sugars. Gloria had said, "You found a different diner." He had said, "The man at the Route 9 place recommended it." She had said, "Is it as good?" He had said, "The eggs are better. The toast is not as good." She had said, "That's always how it goes." They had sat at the kitchen table and eaten the eggs from the Cedar Bridge diner, and drunk the coffee, and talked about the summer. About the tomato plant she had on the balcony that was producing beyond expectations. About the Thursday card group and Dorothy and the geranium ant. About the senior center and the choir at the church on Cedar Bridge Avenue. About the rosebush in the common area, which had been spectacular through June and July, the deep red of it against the green of the shrubs around it. He had said, "You like it here." She had said, "I do. It's a good place. I've found my corners." He had looked at the photograph of Lucille on the windowsill. He had said, "She's coming to visit." Gloria had smiled. The real one, the one that reached her eyes. She had said, "I know. She called me Tuesday." He had said, "She told you before she told me." Gloria had said, "She called me first. That's how she does things." He had thought about his mother calling Gloria first, and smiled the specific smile of someone recognizing a trait they already knew. He had said, "Yes, that's how she does things." They had finished the eggs. The July Brick Township morning had continued outside the window. The tomato on the balcony had been doing well. Everything had been exactly where it was supposed to be. The chain held. It always held, when the right people were in it. That is the whole point. That is what a chain of people is for, to hold. One link at a time, all the way through. From a building on Clinton Avenue to a parking lot, to an apartment in Tom's River, to a permanent home in Brick Township, and the basil on the windowsill, and the photograph of Lucille in the morning light, and the rosebush in April, same as always. That is the story. That is all of it. That is everything. From a morning in 1975 when a woman knocked on a door and said, "I want to watch the boy," to a Wednesday morning in 2025 when a text said, "I am fine, please don't worry, I manage," and the reply came in 4 minutes. And everything that followed from 4 minutes. That is the whole story, every piece of it, exactly enough. There is one last detail. It is small. It happened in December of 2025, 10 months after the text from the parking lot. Gloria Reeves sent Shaquille O'Neal a Christmas card. She sent it by mail. She was the kind of woman who sent things by mail. She addressed it in her careful handwriting to his foundation's Orlando address, because she did not have his home address, and did not feel it was appropriate to ask for it. She bought the card at the pharmacy on Hooper Avenue, the one 4 blocks from her apartment, the one she had found in her first week. The card had a winter scene on the front, snow on pine trees, a warm light in a window. She had chosen it because she liked the light in the window. Inside she wrote 4 sentences. She wrote, "Thank you for the reply in 4 minutes. Thank you for Patricia and the coffee with 2 sugars. Thank you for the diner eggs on a Saturday in February. Merry Christmas, baby." She signed it Gloria. She mailed it the first week of December. It arrived on December 11th. Kevin Okafor brought it in with the morning mail. He put it on Shaq's desk. Shaq opened it later that morning between 2 calls. He read the 4 sentences. He read them again. He set the card down on the desk. He looked at the winter scene on the front, snow on pine trees, a warm light in a window. He thought about the apartment on Hooper Avenue, the window with the garden view, the light that came through in the morning, the photograph of Lucille on the windowsill, the basil, the rosebush in the common area. He thought about 5:15 in the morning, the dark, the lavender, the warmth of being set down carefully in someone else's arms, the specific gift of being held. He picked up the card. He put it on the shelf in his office between the 2 books he read regularly. Same shelf as the shoebox from Eugene Ray Holloway in Irvington. 2 objects, 2 stories, 2 people who gave something when they did not have to, and never asked for anything back, and ended up in the same place on the same shelf. He looked at the shelf. He looked at the card. "Thank you for the reply in 4 minutes." He thought, 4 minutes. He thought, I would have picked up the phone in 1 minute. I would have picked it up as soon as I saw the 973 area code. Newark. Someone from Newark. You always answer Newark, he thought, but she didn't know that. She sat in that parking lot for 3 days with the number, and she almost didn't send it. She almost decided it was too much trouble. She almost decided she was fine. He thought about what would have happened if she had decided that. He thought, she would have figured something out. She always figured something out. She would have found a way through, because that is who she is. She has been finding ways through since 1963, and she will be finding ways through long after this. But it would have been harder, and it would have been alone. And she didn't have to do it alone. And she almost did anyway, because she didn't want to be a bother. He looked at the card. He looked at the light in the window on the front of it. He thought, that is the thing. That is the thing that keeps happening. The people who gave the most are the most reluctant to ask for anything. They calculate what they need against what they think they deserve to ask for, and the calculation always comes up short, because they have spent their whole lives giving, and giving has made them believe that asking is weakness. It is not weakness, it is the other half of the chain. Someone has to give, and someone has to receive, and someone has to find the number, and someone has to drive the van on Tuesdays, and someone has to bring coffee with 2 sugars and not start with the forms, and someone has to reply in 4 minutes. That is the chain. Every link matters, every one, including sending the text. That is the one Gloria almost didn't do. That is the link that almost didn't hold. And it held, and everything followed from the holding, because she sent the text. And the reply came in 4 minutes. And Patricia brought coffee with 2 sugars and didn't start with the forms. And the apartment was on the ground floor with a garden view, and the rosebush bloomed in April. And Lucille called on a Tuesday in May and said, I'll come visit. And Dorothy was at the Thursday card group with an aunt who had geraniums, and the basil on the windowsill is growing still. Same as always. That is the whole story. That is everything it is. That is all.